Okay, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Sport Vitamins. Today, our guest is an NBA strength coach, Bill Burgos. Thanks for taking the time, Bill, and squeezing me into your busy schedule.
No, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be on. I appreciate you.
Okay, can you start giving our listeners a quick background?
Ooh, quick background. This is my 12th year in the NBA, and so I did about almost 8 years with the Magic, and I did 2 years with the Knicks, and then last year I was consultant for the Players Association, and now I'm the head strength coach for the Minnesota Timberwolves. But before that, I was in the military. I did 13 years in the military. I was Army, Air Force combined. I left the military, went to college. I was at Austin Peay State University. And then from Austin Peay, I ended up getting into baseball. I was with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And then from there, I just got an internship with the Magic and then been in the NBA ever since.
How did you get into professional sports?
Man, that's a good question. When I got into pro sports, I was I'm bilingual, so I was able to get into baseball quite easy. And so when I got into baseball, I was able to connect from there. And but with the Magic, I was like constantly emailing and it was a little different back then. With there was no social media, nothing like that. And so I was able to finally connect with the guy through email, and it took about a month or so to respond back. And then from there, I did a couple of visits, and we connected, and been doing it ever since.
Okay, great. It's always super interesting to me when there is a coach that make the transition from baseball to basketball, because I grew up being a baseball player and now I'm a basketball strength coach. So I'm
Oh
always
wow.
curious. So how was the transition from for you?
For me, I've always liked basketball. It's just I just happened to work in baseball, and it wasn't that much of a difference. It probably would have been different if I was like the head strength coach, going from baseball to basketball. But since I went in as an intern, I was allowed to make mistakes. I learned, and so by the time I got to where I wanted to be when I became a head strength coach, it was much easier. I've seen a lot of guys come and go in this league, and mostly because they it's a culture shock, and so it doesn't resonate well with them. So it just takes a little bit longer. But the route I went, I'm thankful for it. So I'm really grateful for starting off as an intern.
And is there something similar between coaching a baseball team or a basketball team, or you need to have a complete different approach with these athletes?
I always feel like an athlete's an athlete, right? So I feel like you still got to explain to them what the benefits are of these exercises, how to do the exercise. I think the only difference is the actual culture of the sport. Baseball is just longer days, and you got to know how to manage that. Whereas in basketball, it's like little spurts spread out throughout the day. But the guys are the same. You got guys that want to work, some guys that is sometimes challenging and trying to get them to work. But I think regardless of sport, it's gonna be you have the same personality that you're dealing with.
Okay, I like it. And doing my research for this podcast, I found out that you're doing a PhD in leadership, right?
Yeah, leadership and organizational behavior through AT Still University, and its emphasis is on EMR monetization. So the reason why I chose it, I mean, there were several doctorate programs that I was looking at, and I chose this one because it just sums everything up. Because everything we do, we collect data, and so it kind of teaches us how to collect data and how to manage it, how to manage people, and so I really liked it. I really enjoyed the class.
And what's the biggest takeaway from this PhD?
The biggest takeaway is how to manage people. And so it talks about the different types of people as a leader that you'll be leading and managing, and how to motivate them, how to keep them engaged, and how to have them buy into your vision. And so that was the biggest thing for me is like the different types of personalities you're dealing with, and how can you get everyone on one accord when trying to create a program.
And I guess this is something that you use on a daily basis with your athletes. And for example, how do you make sure that your athletes buy into your vision?
I think it begins with me. So I have to have some type of personality or some type of character that they could trust in. So I try to build myself as a person that they could rely on. And so I feel like the more trust they have in me, the more they'll buy into the program. Because they see how much time I put into it. And so I think that if I could make myself better each day, spiritually and professionally, I think it will flow into my work ethics.
And what's the most important thing when you deliver your message to your players?
Is be consistent and follow through with it and be confident in how you say it. Because athletes, or just anybody, can read some type of disbelief that you may have in what you're trying to convey. And so if you're very consistent and confident with what you're saying, the guys can pick up the tone and then they'll buy into it.
Do you need to use a different approach when you work with, for example, rookies and veterans?
Yes. Well, I mean, you still got to be consistent, all right, and be very thoughtful in what you say. But rookies, you just got to be a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? But just you got to be more not lenient, not so much lenient, but you got to be more disciplined with those guys because they're trying to figure themselves out, and then you as a strength coach is trying to help them, guide them to that point where they want to be and where they need to be. Whereas a veteran, I'm not saying be so much lenient, but kind of guide them and help them understand how their body's changing and where, some things that they're used to doing may not work anymore. And so you got to be able to guide them through that process because now they're at a point of change and they're towards the end of their career where you as strength coach has to help them along with that process, especially if you're trying to get a little bit more out of them towards the end of their career. And so that's the difference, whereas the rookie is trying to set this foundation routine, so you got to keep them very disciplined, whereas the veteran player, you're just trying to help them with the change throughout that process.
You just mentioned being disciplined, and I guess this is a very important topic, especially for a guy like you that has a background in the military, right? So is it important to have discipline with the pros?
Oh, yes. I mean, discipline goes a long way. I think if I never joined the military, I don't think I'd be where I'm at today because I was a different kid. And I just remember, just the small things in the military meant so much, which led to bigger things. And I remember asking my drill sergeant one time, why does it matter to have toothpaste inside the cap? And he's like, well, if you can't deal with that, what makes you think we can have you guard $1 billion aircraft? So for me it's time. And I know some players don't think it's a big deal, but the way I look at it is if you come in late, right, and it takes away the time from the next person that's coming in because I designed the programs in a way where I can spend time with that person. And so I tell them, you're not really hurting me, you're hurting yourself and your teammate. And so just think about that. These little things lead to big things. Now you're hurting each other. And now what happens when you get on the court? So on and so forth. It becomes a domino effect. So discipline is very important to me. I think it can help them not just with what's going on the court, but also off the court as well, which influences what you do on the court.
Okay, great. Okay, let's move on and let's talk about strength and conditioning now. What's your philosophy in the weight room?
Man, my philosophy in the weight room, one is consistency and be fully engaged in the program. There's so many things because I get so many different types of players. I get guys that can squat. I get guys that can't squat. I get guys who can't do this. I get guys who never lifted because they're so young. And so my biggest thing is, and I was always trying to figure out what is my philosophy. My biggest thing is to be consistent if you want to see change. and be fully engaged into the workout. So that's my philosophy when it comes to strength training, because there's so many things. One guy could benefit more from this type of program than the other. So I try to be as very versatile with my programs, just because everyone has different needs when it comes to their strength conditioning program.
And for example, how have you developed your philosophy over the year?
So our schedule is a little unique. How many games is it over there with your team? How many games?
It depends. Last year we played 60 games plus the preseason. This year, hopefully, we're gonna play something like 70, 75 games. That means that we're going deep into the playoffs.
So of course, we have 82 games plus, stuff that we do in the off season and things like that and preseason. And so for me, it took a little while to develop a program where I know, like when I come to Dallas, I know that I have certain things. And then I know when to deload certain weeks and stuff like that. And so it took me a while to figure that out because we don't often come to these places. It's like, when I was at the Eastern Conference, we used to go to Portland once a year. So it took me a couple of years to figure out what's in Portland. But my biggest thing is, so I started doing within a 10-day period, started creating these like microcycles. And then within the microcycle, I look at like different types of strength programs that I'm trying to accomplish because of the residual training effect. So I look at, I try to make sure I do a power day. And then, and that could be various things. It could be with a ball. Some guys could do well with a barbell or a dumbbell. And then I'll focus on another day where it'd be more of a strength session. And then I'll do another restoration. So those are the three stuff that I try to implement within that 10-day period. Now, what I try to do is figure out what days I could do it in because I just don't know the schedule quite yet. So I try to figure out when I could do these things and what do I have available. So I'm constantly planning, basically. It's not like a nice periodized program where I could just follow it through and 8 a.m, this, blah, blah, blah. It's not like that at all. And so what it's like is basically just figuring out, like last night, I didn't know the schedule till almost 1 a.m, but guys are already sleeping. I'm not going to text guys at 1 a.m, say, hey, and that's because we got in a little late. So I know that I don't have access to a lot of things here in Dallas, but I have something here at the hotel. So I'm going to do a nice little strength cycle, which is going to complement. And then I try to make sure it's no more than 2 to 3 days apart if possible because of the detraining effect and things like that. And so sometimes we'll lift after, sometimes we'll lift before a game. It just depends what's going on through that cycle. But everything's based around a 10-day period for me and try to get 3 things done within the 10-day period. Now, every day we are doing some type of mobility, so some type of movement. And pregame, I have this big, strong belief in terms of increasing the testosterone level prior to the game. Because, when we play, we produce cortisol. So, I'm trying to, increase that testosterone-cortisol ratio. And so by doing some type of pre-competitive strength session, but at a moderate to low load, that's somewhat specific to what they're doing. And they cycle through I basically get the entire team before the game actually starts. And it takes 10 minutes, if that. But we try to keep it as live as possible because music plays a big part of this. If I had no music in that weight room, so we carry a little speaker and stuff. If I had no music in that weight room, there'll be no energy. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love it. I also love what you just said about lifting before the game, and it takes just 10 or 15 minutes. For example, this year I had the chance to work with a player that you worked with in the NBA, Shelby Mack, and he likes to lift right before the game, every time.
Yeah.
Just a short circuit, 15, 20 minutes, and then he's ready to go. And I really love it. So let's talk about assessment. What kind of assessment do you conduct with your athletes?
So right now they use, when I got here, they were already using Fusionetics. And so I've been on several teams. And so in New York, Andy Barr our physical therapist there, he had his own screening process that he had put together, and basically looking at all types of faulty movements and then going from there. And then when I was in Orlando, we our other physical therapist had another type of movement screen that he created himself, looking at certain patterns. And then when I was in baseball, we did Harushka. So we did a Harushka test, and we looked at, like, basically it was the guy leaned on his side, put his leg on my shoulder, then he would lift up his bottom leg and try to get his hip off the ground. And depending on what level he lifted his hip up to would determine what kind of exercises he would implement throughout his training program. But the biggest thing with me is because I'm actually talking about this because I'm an adjunct professor at Austin Peay State University, and we're in the module we're talking about movement screens, right? And so there's, like I said, there's plenty of movement screens out there that identify deficiencies. I think the biggest thing, which is the most important, is what do you do? All right. So now you have these movement screens, because what I've seen a lot in pros and college, whatever, is nobody really does anything afterwards. So I think that the biggest thing is what exercise are you going to implement and how are you going to include it into the strength program, and what are the progressions of exercises? What's your planning when it comes to after the screening is done? And so if you're able to identify those deficiencies and be consistent with it and monitor it throughout, I think any kind of movement screen program would suffice, just as long as we're consistent and seeing what you're doing, and then we're actually correcting the faulty pattern movements with your strength program.
What do you mean about being consistent with it? Like how many times a week, for example, you try to work on those deficiencies?
So, for example, just like any strength program, right? So, like, we try to implement a program within 2 to 3 times a week, right? So we could see type of improvement or maintenance. Same thing with faulty movement patterns. Your body functions the same. So if you have tight adductors, that's leading to poor torque production, which is in the hip. So you want to, like, constantly attack those adductors. I try to do it on a daily basis, and but I try to implement that with my strength program. Everything's in an orderly fashion. So I have a player that just last night, actually, we just did a strength program, and so the screening is I'm constantly screening the athletes. And what I mean by that is not just the movement screen itself, but also while they're training, also during the warm up. And I know that some coaches prefer to do more, basketball and more like other things for the warm up, but it's also a good time for me to have all the guys at one time to go through some movements where there's balance. It's a warm up, but it's also aesthetically, you're looking at how they're moving too, and what adjustments can you make, and you take those mental notes and then you try to apply that in your program. So just last night I had a guy, and he's new to our team because we just traded for him, but we were doing some squat to press, dumbbell squat to press, and his knees kept going in, and then it kept flying to. It was just the movement was pretty bad, so I had to add in these 5-pound plates to raise his heels. I had to, and then I basically added one more movement, which was just foam rolling his abductors, and he actually felt the difference. And the thing is if as strength, I feel like strength coaches are constantly screening their athletes, and I think you probably do it too. While you're training your guys, you're watching them. So even though we did a movement screen, we're still watching them, and we're still correcting those movements. And I think that as long as we take that note on the deficiency they just did, like last night with my guy, now I know I'm going to add these things before it becomes a big problem, which is known as creep. So creep is basically where like a tight adductor, nothing happens now, but it just starts creeping up to the point where next he starts having these groin injuries and whatever the case may be. I don't want those things to creep up. So I'm constantly monitoring my guys while they're moving.
Yeah, I like your answer. And there's something that I usually do. For example, I use the FMS, and a lot of my players, for example, ask me why we don't do the FMS like every month. And I always tell them, man, I screen you every single workout when we are in the weight room.
Yeah.
Like you're doing lunges, you're doing overhead presses and everything. So I'm screening you every single day. And what's the one thing that you want to know about your athlete when you have, for example, a new player?
Well, every time I get a new guy, and I'll call around, and I know everybody wants to tell me what's wrong with them. I just want to know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. The reason why I say that is because I just want to know, how do I need to talk to him? How do I need to approach him? Because I will always, us as strength coaches, we're going to do a screen and we're going to do anything we can anyway. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's good to know these things, whatever their what their deficits are. But I just want to know, what's their personality like? How do I need to approach these guys? Because I think that's the most important thing for me as a strength coach. Because then if I could connect well with that guy, then regardless of what I say, they will buy into it just because I connected well. But if I can't connect with the guy and he's not buying into me, it doesn't matter how much schooling you have. It doesn't matter at all. Yeah, and I've seen it. Not just with me, but I'm just saying, like, I've seen it with other teams where you have a guy that's not as he's not a he's not an exceptional strength coach, but the player loves him, but he's causing so much harm to this guy. And so the thing is, it's like, how do you get that guy to buy into you? And the first thing for me is what's his personality, and then I could go from there.
How do you keep improving your athletes throughout the season, even if your season is a grind? You play, as you mentioned, as you said, like a lot of games. You travel all over the country, and you travel through different time zones.
How do I keep guys engaged?
Yeah, engaged, and how do you keep improving them?
So one thing is I got to make the weight room fun. So I got to want them to want to be in the weight room where it's not boring, because I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to keeping the guys engaged. And then if you keep them engaged, then more than likely you can help them you can help them improve in what they're trying to do, or you can help maintain where you're trying to be. The reason why I say that, because once they find the weight room fun and they keep coming in, then it goes hand in hand. The more they come in, the more they have fun, the more they're willing to work, and the more they'll see the improvements. And so that's why, like I said, music and the energy and everything like that is very important for these guys to come in and to want to do more to make themselves better.
Who does control the music in the weight room?
So the way I do it, normally I'll play the music at first.
Okay.
So I'll play music. I'm not a big I hate music with profanity, like a lot of profanity. So I try to control the music at first. But if you're a player that's been on ESPN and been talked about a lot, then you have control of the music. And then they take charge from it. Yeah.
Okay. How do you keep up with the traveling?
So how do I keep up with the traveling? Like, what do you mean exactly? Just like, how do I manage being on the road so much?
Yeah.
So I bring a lot of books with me. And so what I'll do is, for the first hour or so, I usually I do my own thing. So I have a lot of spiritual, professional development. So I do read about 2 to 3 hours in the morning time, and then I'll work out. I'll lift on my own, or with a friend of mine. Usually on my own. The most, it's just I feel like it's more therapeutic that way. And then because I've already prepared the night before, so what I'll do the night before, I kind of go through my thought process on what happened today, what do I need to do the following day, and I already have most of my workout programs are already written out. I just got to figure out what days am I doing it on, and then but what helps me actually manage on the road is the reading. I don't really go out much. I just stay inside. I learn, I read, and I think that helps me along with that process.
What are your favorite readings?
So right now I'm reading a book on leadership, spiritual development, which is by Boy Bailey, and then and I read, of course, the Bible, and then I'll read like a book on Anatoly. I can't even say his name right. Bondarchuk. You know what I'm talking about? Bondarchuk. He's basically talking about periodization.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll read those books again. I'm actually reading my own book. I'm reading my book right now again, Strength Training for Basketball.
I have it here.
And then I also, oh yeah, I appreciate that. And then what's the other book I'm reading? I'm reading another book. It's a book on organizational leadership, and so I'm reading a book on that. And that's with my doctors, of course. And then I just read a bunch of articles, like any article, like anything that, just anything. Like if a guy has a deficiency in something, even though I may have read it before, let's say we have a guy with a knee issue, I'm going to pull up 3 or 4 articles within the past 5 years, and I'm going to read it. And then I'll look at that stuff, and then I'll go back to reading about like just anything that's like load management, like that's a hot topic right now. And so I went back and started looking at books on restorative measures, looking at the science, how long does it take to recover? You know, like it takes months, I believe, for muscle function to restore back to normal resting life. So I go back looking at those things because it's like, I remember, how can I put it? It's like, it's not like I don't know it. It's just, I'm just trying to like really get skilled at it. And so I'll continuously reread this stuff again.
Makes sense. I like it.
And I time it though. So I have my Apple Watch and I put on 60 minutes. Let's say I'm doing leadership development. So I just look at books and stuff, and then I put my watch on. Once that thing buzzes, then I stop.
I got it. Do you want to tell us something about your book? It's really interesting.
So,
I got it 2 weeks ago, and I dove into it. I really like it. So tell us something about it.
So, strength training for basketball was so when Human Kinetics and the NSCA contacted me and Javar about putting this book together. First of all, I was excited about it. I mean, that they asked us, but and I really thank them for the opportunity. So the idea was, what me and Javar was talking about, was basically creating the book to where it talks about the basic fundamentals of strength training. So I feel like a lot of training is swaying away from that, where it's like you talk about a lot about sports specificity, but what happens is we tend to sway away from just traditional strength training, which is the most important, how to absorb the load, how to absorb that power. And when you talk about load management, strength training is a part of it, right? And so when we put this book together and got a lot of the contributors, such as Robbie Sicca, Steve Smith, Josh, Bill Ferran, especially, and his son Eric, and Barr and Andy Barr, I just thought, why not take what we've learned throughout this industry and then share with people and players too as well? Because I just think we're swaying away from the most basic fundamentals of performance, and I think it's time to bring that back.
Okay, I like it. You also were in charge of the MBSCA, right? A few years ago.
Yes.
What was the main goal of your position?
So my main goal was to, the way I always said it was, and I told my guys this, was to protect our future, and honor our past. And what I mean by that was trying to get us into the CBA, which we were able to do, which the collective bargaining agreement, where now it's required each team is to have a strength coach with a certain type of certification, which is the CSCS. And what I mean by protecting, honoring our past is guys like Eric Helen, Bill Ferran, Dwight Dobb, Robin Pound, all those strength coaches from the past, Mark McCown. Those guys kind of help. They set the path that we're in today, right? They're the actual true trailblazers of strength conditioning in the NBA. And I think that by honoring our past, not only allows us to keep strength conditioning as pure as possible and alive within the NBA, but also we're able to protect our future, which is the GLeague guys, the interns, those kind of guys that are coming in. So we're trying to set ways, because the game is changing throughout this time. And I think I wasn't just trying to protect our profession. I was trying to improve the quality of training by making sure that we have certified individuals within the league. Now, the reason why my vision was to maintain this these types of strength coaches in the league, which is certified and qualified, and they're just great at what they do. But also that leads to our financial security, which is we had a contribution plan, which is when guys are ready to leave or retire, they have a nice chunk of change that they could retire with. So that was my other vision, was basically to make sure we have qualified and certified strength coaches within each team, which improves the quality of training, but then it also creeps into our financial security, which is our contribution plan.
And do you guys have also a strong connection with the GLeague strength and conditioning trainer?
So now, at that time, we were just building it. When I was there, the idea was to bring them in because there would be a point where they'll transition into the NBA, what most guys do, and then I believe now there is a strong connection with the GLeague. Like my GLeague strength coach was just texting me right now, so now that they're more involved, and which is great because it makes our association stronger, right? But at the same time, it gives them the support that they need, and it gives them an easy way to transition into the big league.
And let's talk about you as a strength coach during the year. Do you kind of supervise the GLeague strength coach?
So in the past, I've with when I was in Lakeland in Florida, and so but I had a good strength coach there, which his name is Zibo Hasib, and he's we had the same mindset, so we would just constantly communicate back and forth, and then he would come and visit us. But the thing is, we were close. We were like less than 40 minutes away. Now I have a good strength coach. His name is Charles Loftus, and he is he's in Iowa, which is about 4 hours away. So it's a little bit challenging for us to see each other as often as possible. But what I've noticed this year, we had more guys going to the GLeague and back and forth. There's a lot more movement than I've ever seen before in my NBA career. So, but we communicate as much as we can. We have, texting and things like that, but we do communicate. But he has the freedom to do, because I'm not down there. So he has the freedom to create the strength program just as long as it's in line with what we're doing. And he's been around with me, so he kind of knows what's expected. But he does a great job down in the GLeague, and I'm very fortunate to have someone like him.
Okay, great. Let's finish off this episode with 3 rapid-fire questions, okay? So the first one, I always see that you post pictures of sneakers. So what's your favorite pair of sneakers?
My favorite pair of sneakers is the Jordan 11s. I love sneakers. I guess I consider myself a sneakerhead, so Jordan 11s are my favorite.
Okay, great. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book is The 4 Disciplines of Execution by Steve Covey. I always mess up his last name. Stephen Covey, yeah.
Okay. And one piece of advice for a young strength coach?
One piece of advice for a young strength coach is to know your role, but also work as hard as you can and help the strength coach and every other person that's there in that department as much as you can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Bill. Thanks for taking the time and for hanging out with us today. I really appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I finally got to do this, and I'm glad I did it. So.
Okay, thank you. It's been a lot of fun.